And that's the story of how old Pegasus Bill made it rain popcorn. What do you mean, tall tale? You calling me a liar? Oh, what story would you like to hear? Dear Tim and Moby, I just learned that my state used to be part of Mexico. What's the deal with that? From Ernesto. You learned right. California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and parts of Wyoming and Colorado were all once Mexican territories. I know, almost 2/3 of Mexico's original holdings are now part of the United States. Most of this territory changed hands at the close of the Mexican-American War. Well, it was a 2-year fight starting in 1846, but the conflict became a rallying cry not just in Texas, but across America. Then there was the issue of manifest destiny, the belief of many Americans that the country was meant to expand to the Pacific Ocean. It was just a matter of time before America's ambition to span the continent butted up against the fact that a huge chunk of it was still owned by Mexico. It all came to a head in 1845 when the U.S. admitted Texas as its 28th state.
Question number 1. What was the year that Texas became a state? What was the year that Texas became a state?
Knowing that the new border was disputed, President James K. Polk sent troops to the Rio Grande. They were led by General and future President Zachary Taylor. Meanwhile, Polk offered Mexico up to $30 million for the California and New Mexico territories. Mexico refused the offer and sent soldiers to a spot just across the river from General Taylor's army.
Question number 2. What was the main cause of the U.S.-Mexican War? What was the main cause of the U.S.-Mexican War?
Within weeks, fighting broke out, and the U.S. Congress declared war. Some opposed the war, including a young congressman named Abraham Lincoln. But most Americans, and Mexicans too, were ready for a fight. The American strategy was to take the war to Mexico. General Taylor and General Winfield Scott easily overran key cities throughout the country. The war ended on February 2nd, 1848, with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Mexico recognized the Texas border and gave up a huge tract of land known as the Mexican Section.
Question number 3. What did the United States get from the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo? What did the United States get from the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo?
Mexico recognized the Texas border and gave up a huge tract of land known as the Mexican Cession. In return, the U.S. paid Mexico $15 million and forgave $3 million in debt. 5 years later, the Gadsden Purchase, a $10 million land sale, moved the Mexican-American border to where it is today. Yeah, it was controversial then, too. Some say the U.S. bullied a weaker country into war. Others say that Mexico could have avoided the conflict if it had acted responsibly. Instead of negotiating a deal with America, Mexican leaders were busy fighting among themselves. Either way, the war cost tens of thousands of lives and permanently damaged relations with Mexico. But it also gave America the land it needed to build a great nation. There's no real answer to who was right and who was wrong. Most of the time, history isn't that simple. Yes, I am fine with that.
Okay, so I want to make sure that we're clear about what the answers were for our warm-up. Obviously, the first one is going to be what was the year of Texas statehood, and that will be 1845.
And that's
Question
the
number
story of
3
how old Pecos Bill.
is going to talk about what did the United States get from the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And if we kind of fast forward the video here, we'll see the actual states. And here it is right here. Let's play the play.
California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and
Okay, so these were all the states that we received from the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So California, Arizona, as they just stated, all of those countries, all those states, all that land is what we got from Mexico after the U.S.-Mexican War through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Okay, and I'm going to fast forward now to the part that talks about what was the main cause of the U.S.-Mexican War. And what you should have gotten out of that was it was a land dispute. So we're going to talk about that right now.
for America's ambition to span the continent butted up against the fact that a huge chunk of it was still owned by Mexico. It all came to a head in 1845 when the U.S. admitted Texas as its 28th state. Knowing that the new border was disputed, President James K. Polk sent troops.
Okay, so what I mean by the border was disputed was that Texas was saying that this was their border. Mexico said this was their border up here a little further north. And so the result then is that this blue line, from Mexico's perspective, this blue line would be inside of Mexico. But Texas is saying the blue line is still inside of Texas. So that's what they're disagreeing about. Okay. So when they move troops to this blue line, they're technically moving troops into Mexico from Mexico's perspective. From Texas's perspective, or the United States perspective, they own that land. So this is why they say they kind of bullied them into a war or pushed them to a war, was because they knew that if we move these troops right up here against this blue line, that then would mean that they would be inside of Mexico. And of course, what country would not start a war with you if you move your troops inside of their country? So again, in closing, what was the main cause of the U.S.-Mexican War? It was a land dispute. A land dispute. All right. So also today, I know yesterday I talked about the project. So I'm going to go over real quick the update on the Texas annexation rubric. So what I've done is I've adjusted it because I want to make sure I'm clear as to how you can get your most points. So for right now, if you do every one of these things in the checklist, right? Every one of these things is what I need. That tells me that you're using the content or that you understood the content from your notes. That's going to give you your 66 points, right? 11 points each. So I've adjusted that down a little bit. If you decide to do something digital, meaning did you make an effort to learn how to create something? I don't want to see just a picture of your handwritten assignment and you took a picture of it. I mean, you actually tried to do something in a digital format. So if you did that, if you do something that's kind of easy, you'll get 5 points. If you did something that was kind of quite more difficult, you'll get an additional 12 points. Okay. Now, so here's basically how it's going to work. If you are a person who is super creative and doesn't mind taking the risk and doing the digital stuff, you can go ahead and get an A by doing 66 points, by doing 12, getting 12 points here, and then by getting 22 points for being super creative, that gets you to a 100. All right. Now, if you're not necessarily the most creative person, but you're a hard worker, then you can take these 66 points, doing everything that's on this list, skipping the digital part, just doing it by hand, being very minimally creative at 4, but by going here and doing 2 assignments on the choice board, you can then get 25 points, and that'll get you a 95. So that means all you have to do is do the checklist up here. You don't even have to do anything digital. You don't even have to be all that creative. But if you do two of them instead of one, I'll give you an additional 25 points, and that'll put you at a 95. All right. So you can get an A by either being really creative or working really hard. Either of those two things. Now, if you just are you're one of the people who just want to get the grade and just move on, then you can just get your 66 points here. You can skip the digital part. You can be very leastly creative and get 4 points, and that's your 70. 66 plus 4, 70, and you've passed. You got a passing grade. Okay? So you have different paths that you can decide to take as to which one will make you successful. But really, everybody, that's all I was going over in class today. It was just going over Mexican Cession, which we went over, and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the U.S. Mexican War. So we've talked about that. And then talking about the updated rubric for your assignment that's due tomorrow as a major grade. All right. Again, everybody, if you have any questions, please hit me in Schoology, and I'll be doing my best to go through the day and responding to all of those messages. All right. I hope everybody's doing well, and see you guys soon.